My name is Corinne Bellamy. I'm 29 years old. 11 days ago, I sat in a federal courthouse in Charlotte, North Carolina, and watched my mother cry into a tissue while a judge read aloud the charges against her and my father. Wire fraud, identity theft, bank fraud, conspiracy to commit financial fraud. 4 counts each. The kind of charges that come with numbers attached, not dollars this time, but years. My father sat beside her in a suit I'd never seen before, probably borrowed, staring at the table in front of him like it held instructions for how to disappear. His attorney kept whispering to him, but he wasn't listening. He was looking at me. Across the courtroom, past the prosecutors, past the federal agent who'd spent 14 months building the case, past everything that used to be our family. He was looking at me like I was the one who'd done something wrong. I was 22 years old when my mother sat me down in her sewing room, the one that smelled like lavender and fabric softener, and said, "Corinne, we used your information to help your brother get started. Just a few accounts, just until his business gets going. You won't even notice." She said it the way you'd tell someone you borrowed a cup of sugar. Casual, small, like what she'd done wasn't a federal crime. What she meant by a few accounts was 11. 11 loans, 11 lines of credit, all opened in my name, all without my knowledge, totaling $214,000 in debt attached to a Social Security number I'd had since birth. All funneled directly into my brother Derek's restaurant that was hemorrhaging money faster than my parents could steal it. But what they didn't know was that their quiet, dependable daughter, the one they'd treated like a blank check her entire life, had spent 2 years inside a forensic accountant's office and an FBI field office, tracing every single dollar. And when the agents showed up at my parents' front door with a warrant, they weren't just holding handcuffs. They were holding the complete financial autopsy of a family built on fraud, favoritism, and the assumption that I'd never fight back. Before I tell you how this unfolded, please like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this story. Drop a comment. Where are you watching from and what time is it there? I'd love to hear from you. Now let me take you back to where this all started. Growing up in Kannapolis, North Carolina, a mill town 30 minutes northeast of Charlotte, I learned that our family had one son and one servant. They just called us both their children, my family. Dad was a floor manager at a textile plant that had been downsizing since I was born. He held on to his job through 3 rounds of layoffs through sheer stubbornness and a willingness to work shifts nobody else wanted. Mom worked part-time at a fabric store and full-time managing Derek's life. My brother Derek, 4 years older than me, was the prince, the firstborn son, the one who was going to make something of himself and put the Bellamy name on the map. He'd been told this since he could walk, and he believed it the way you believe in gravity, completely and without question. Then there was me, Corinne, the responsible one, the one who made her bed without being asked, who brought home A's like they were table settings, who started working at 15 because nobody offered to pay for anything I needed. Derek got the dream. I got the discipline. When I was 12, I entered a statewide math competition and placed 3rd out of 400 students. My teacher, Mrs. Abernathy, called my parents to say I was exceptionally gifted and should be placed in the advanced program. Mom said she'd think about it. She never brought it up again. Same month, Derek failed his driver's test for the 2nd time. Dad took a half-day off work, something he never did, to practice parallel parking with him in the church lot for 3 hours. I placed 3rd in the state. Derek couldn't park a car. Guess which one made the dinner conversation? I told myself driving was a practical skill. Math competitions were just puzzles. At 15, I got a part-time job at a frozen yogurt shop because I needed clothes for school, and Mom said the budget was tight. I bought my own jeans, my own school supplies, my own graphing calculator. That Christmas, Derek got a $2,800 gaming PC because he'd mentioned he was interested in graphic design. He used it exclusively to play Call of Duty. By February, he'd dropped the graphic design idea entirely. $2,800 for a phase. I couldn't get $40 for a school binder without earning it myself. I told myself boys needed more investment. I could take care of myself. At 17, I was accepted to UNC Charlotte's honors program with a partial academic scholarship. I needed $3,200 a year in family contribution to cover the gap. Dad said they'd see what they could do. They did nothing. I took out student loans. $3,200 a year for 4 years. $12,800 in debt before I ever got a credit card. Same year, Derek announced he was going to culinary school. Not a real culinary school, a 6-month certificate program at a for-profit trade institute in Raleigh. Cost? $18,000. My parents paid every cent. Mom took out a personal loan. Dad worked overtime for 6 months straight. They treated it like an investment in the family's future. Derek lasted 4 months. Dropped out, moved back home, got a job at an Applebee's. $18,000 for 4 months. I got $0 for 4 years. I told myself culinary school was expensive. College scholarships meant I didn't need help. The math made sense if you didn't look too closely. But all of that was just the warm-up. The real crime, and I use that word literally, started the year I turned 22. I need to explain what happened with Derek's restaurant so you understand what my parents were funding with my identity. After bouncing between restaurant jobs for 3 years, Applebee's, a barbecue joint, a diner that closed after 8 months, Derek decided he was going to open his own place. A Southern fusion restaurant in Concord called Bellamy's Table. He had the name, the concept, a menu he'd sketched on a napkin, and absolutely zero business acumen. He needed startup capital. A commercial kitchen build-out, equipment, licensing, initial inventory, staffing. The realistic estimate was around $180,000 to open the doors. Derek had $4,000 in savings. His credit score was 520. No bank on earth would lend him money. My parents couldn't qualify either. Dad's income was steady but modest, $52,000 a year. Mom's part-time work brought in maybe $14,000. They had a mortgage, a car payment, and the remains of the culinary school loan. Their debt-to-income ratio disqualified them from any significant lending. But there was one person in the family with a clean financial profile. Me. At 22, I just graduated from UNC Charlotte with a degree in accounting. Ironic, I know. I had a 3.7 GPA, no credit card debt, a modest student loan balance I was already paying down, and a credit score of 740 that I'd built carefully over 4 years through a secured credit card and on-time payments. I was the perfect borrowing profile, young, clean, and completely unaware of what my parents were about to do with it. Here's what they did. My mother had access to my social security number, my date of birth, and my personal information, because she was my mother and I'd never had a reason to guard those things from her. She also had access to my mail, because I'd kept my parents' address as my permanent mailing address through college, something millions of people do without a second thought. Over a period of 14 months, beginning 3 weeks after I graduated, my parents opened the following accounts in my name: a business line of credit through a regional bank, $35,000. A small business loan through an online lender, $28,000. A personal loan through a credit union, $15,000. 3 credit cards with combined limits of $42,000. A second business loan through a different online lender, $31,000. An equipment financing agreement, $22,000. 2 additional personal lines of credit, $18,000 and $23,000. Total, $214,000. Every application was submitted online using my information. Every piece of mail, every statement, every confirmation letter, every payment notice was intercepted at my parents' address before I ever saw it. My mother set up email addresses in my name that I didn't know existed. She answered verification calls using a prepaid phone. She didn't just steal my identity, she built an entire shadow financial life in my name and operated it for over a year without leaving a single thread I could pull. The money went directly into Bellamy's Table. Equipment, build-out, inventory, staffing. Derek opened the restaurant in March. He hired a chef he couldn't afford, leased a space twice the size he needed, and spent $14,000 on a custom neon sign that said, Bellamy's, in cursive above the door. By month 3, the restaurant was losing $12,000 a month. By month 6, Derek was bouncing checks. By month 10, he was 3 months behind on rent, and the equipment financing company was sending notices. Notices addressed to Corinne Bellamy. I found out the way most identity theft victims find out, by accident and too late. I was 23, working as a staff accountant at a mid-size firm in Charlotte called Hargrove & Associates. I'd been there 8 months. I was good at my job, careful with numbers, building a career one spreadsheet at a time. I was also applying for my first apartment, a one-bedroom in Noda, a neighborhood I loved. The leasing office ran my credit. The property manager called me back with a voice that was trying very hard to be neutral. Ms. Bellamy, your application has been declined. Your credit report shows significant outstanding debt and several accounts in collections. That's impossible. I have one student loan and a credit card with a $500 limit. According to TransUnion, you have 11 open accounts with a combined balance of $214,000. 4 of them are in default. The room tilted. I asked her to email me the report. I sat in my car in the parking lot of that apartment complex and read my own credit report on my phone screen. 11 accounts I'd never opened, balances I'd never borrowed, default notices for payments I'd never known about. I scrolled through the account details: business loans, credit cards, equipment financing, all opened within the same 14-month window, all linked to a business entity registered in North Carolina, Bellamy's Table, LLC, my brother's restaurant. My parents had leveraged my entire financial identity to fund Derek's failing business. Every dollar, every account, every signature, forged. I sat in that car for 40 minutes. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I went somewhere past those reactions, to a place that was colder and clearer. The place where an accountant stops seeing family and starts seeing evidence. I drove to my office. It was a Saturday, nobody was there. I sat at my desk, opened a blank spreadsheet, and began logging every account, every date, every balance, every payment. I cross-referenced the account opening dates with my own calendar, proving I was in class, at work, or in another city when the applications were submitted. By midnight, I had a preliminary forensic map of the fraud. 11 accounts, 14 months, $214,000. Every dollar traceable to an LLC registered to my brother at an address that matched my parents' home. I saved the file, named it Case. The next morning, I called the one person I trusted without hesitation, Mrs. Abernathy, my math teacher from middle school, the one who'd seen something in me when I was 12 and had stayed in touch through college. She was retired now, living in Mooresville, volunteering at a literacy center. She picked up on the second ring. Corinne, is everything all right? I told her everything. The credit report, the accounts, Derek's restaurant, my parents. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, Corinne, when you were 12, you solved problems that most adults couldn't approach. You're not 12 anymore, but the skill is the same. You know how to follow the numbers. Follow them. They're my parents, Mrs. Abernathy. They committed a crime against you, sweetheart. Being your parents doesn't change the math. She was right. It didn't change the math. I spent the next 2 months in a state of controlled fury, building my case with the meticulousness that made me good at my job and the rage that made me relentless. I pulled every credit report from all 3 bureaus. I filed disputes on every fraudulent account, documenting them but not yet resolving them because I needed the evidence chain intact. I requested copies of the original loan applications through FOIA-adjacent channels and direct requests to the lending institutions. 3 of the 11 lenders provided copies of the applications. My mother's handwriting was on 2 of them. The third had a digital signature that was submitted from an IP address registered to my parents' home internet provider. I hired an attorney named Marcus Webb, a former federal prosecutor who now practiced financial crime defense and victim advocacy. He cost me $15,000 in initial retainer fees, money I borrowed from my 401k, which felt like performing surgery on yourself with your own scalpel. Marcus reviewed everything. His assessment was delivered without sentimentality. Corinne, this is textbook identity theft and bank fraud. The amounts exceed the federal threshold for wire fraud charges. If you report this to the FBI, your parents will be investigated, and they will likely be indicted. And Derek? He's the beneficiary of the fraud. Whether he knew the source of the funding determines his exposure. If he knew your identity was used, he's a co-conspirator. If he didn't, he's a witness. What happens if I don't report it? The debt is yours. $214,000. Your credit is destroyed. You'll spend 5 to 7 years digging out, assuming the defaulted accounts don't result in judgments or wage garnishments. And your parents face no consequences. I went home that night and stared at the ceiling until 3 a.m. Then I got up, drove to Marcus's office at 8 a.m. Monday morning and said, "File the report." The FBI assigned Special Agent Denise Calloway to the case. She was mid-40s, sharp-eyed, and had the particular patience of someone who'd spent 20 years following money through people who thought they were smarter than the system. Agent Calloway and I met 8 times over 14 months. Each meeting, I brought more documentation. She brought subpoena results. Together, we built a case that was architecturally precise. The bank records confirmed every transfer. $214,000 flowed from 11 accounts in my name into 3 intermediary accounts, all controlled by my parents, and then into the operating account of Bellamy's Table LLC. The money trail was clean and unbroken. Every dollar accounted for. The IP records confirmed that loan applications were submitted from my parents' home. The email accounts used to verify the applications were created using a prepaid phone registered to a convenience store 2 miles from their house, the same store where my mother bought calling cards every month. The signature analysis confirmed forgery on 4 physical documents. A handwriting expert matched the signatures to my mother's known handwriting with a confidence level of 97.3%. Derek, as it turned out, claimed he didn't know. Agent Calloway interviewed him separately. He said his parents told him they'd worked with a financial advisor to secure the startup funding. He said he never asked where the money came from because they told me it was handled. I don't fully believe him, but the FBI couldn't prove he knew, so he wasn't charged. During those 14 months, I continued to interact with my family. I went to Christmas. I answered Mom's calls. I listened to Derek talk about the restaurant's struggles, the irony so thick I could barely breathe through it, and I said nothing. My parents had no idea what was coming. The day the FBI came was a Tuesday in October. Agent Calloway and 2 other agents arrived at my parents' house at 7:15 a.m. with a search warrant. They seized 2 laptops, a filing cabinet full of financial records, the prepaid phone, and a shoebox in my mother's closet that contained, I learned later, every credit card statement from every account she'd opened in my name, organized by month with rubber bands. She'd kept records, meticulous ones. Like mother, like daughter, I suppose. Dad was in his bathrobe when they knocked. Mom was making coffee. The agents told them they were under investigation for wire fraud, identity theft, and bank fraud in connection with accounts opened in the name of Corinne Bellamy. Mom's first words, according to Agent Calloway, "This is a misunderstanding. We were going to pay it all back." They always say that. It's never true. My parents were formally indicted 6 weeks later, 4 counts each. Wire fraud carries up to 20 years per count. Identity theft carries a mandatory 2-year minimum. Bank fraud carries up to 30 years. They weren't going to serve maximums, but they were going to serve something. The family found out in stages. Aunt Pauline called me first. "Corinne, your mother says the FBI raided her house. She says it's a mistake. Is it a mistake?" "No, Aunt Pauline, it's not a mistake." "What happened?" "They opened $214,000 in loans and credit accounts in my name to fund Derek's restaurant. I didn't know until my credit was destroyed. I reported it. The silence on the line lasted 10 seconds. You reported your own parents to the FBI? My own parents stole my identity and put me $214,000 in debt. Yes, I reported them. Aunt Pauline was quiet again. Then, good. That one word meant more than she knew. The extended family split roughly down the middle. Half understood, half called me a traitor. Uncle Craig left a voicemail calling me cold-blooded. My cousin Tanya posted on Facebook, without naming names, about family members who call the police instead of solving things at home. Mrs. Abernathy sent me a card in the mail. Inside, she'd written, "The numbers don't lie. Neither do you. I'm proud of you, Corinne." I put it on my refrigerator. It's still there. Derek called me once after the indictment. His voice was flat, defeated. "Did you have to do this?" "You're asking the wrong person that question, Derek." "I didn't know they used your name." "Maybe, but you never asked where $214,000 came from for a restaurant run by a man with $4,000 in savings and a 520 credit score. You didn't want to know. That's not innocence. That's convenience." He hung up. We haven't spoken since. The court proceedings began last month. 11 days ago was the arraignment hearing, the one I described at the beginning. I sat in the gallery of the federal courthouse in Charlotte. My parents sat at the defense table. Mom in a navy dress she'd probably bought for church. Dad in the borrowed suit. Their attorney, a public defender named Mr. Gilchrist, had advised them to plead not guilty, though Marcus told me privately that a plea deal was almost certainly coming. The judge read the charges. 4 counts each. The courtroom was half full, a few family members, some court regulars, Agent Calloway in the second row with a colleague. When the judge asked how they pleaded, my mother said, "Not guilty," in a voice so small the court reporter asked her to repeat it. My father said the same, but he was looking at me when he said it. Not with anger, with something worse. Bewilderment. Like he genuinely couldn't understand how protecting himself by destroying me had led to this room. After the hearing, in the hallway outside the courtroom, my mother broke away from Mr. Gilchrist and walked toward me. Agent Calloway stepped forward slightly, but I shook my head. It was fine. Mom stood in front of me. Her makeup was intact, but her eyes were ruined. Red, swollen, the eyes of a woman who'd been crying for weeks. "Corinne, I need you to understand. We did it for Derek, for the family. We were going to pay it back when the restaurant succeeded. The restaurant failed, Mom. It lost $144,000 in 10 months. There was never going to be money to pay back." "We didn't know that." "You didn't care. You gambled with my future because it was easier than telling Derek no. It's always been easier to take from me than to disappoint him." She reached for my hand. I let her hold it for 3 seconds. Then I stepped back. "I hope you get a fair outcome, Mom. I really do. But I won't apologize for protecting myself from the people who should have protected me." She didn't respond. Dad was standing 10 feet behind her, watching. I turned and walked down the courthouse hallway. Marcus walked beside me. Neither of us spoke until we reached the parking garage. "You did the right thing," he said. "I know. That's what makes it so hard." The plea deal came through last week. Mom pled guilty to wire fraud and identity theft. Dad pled guilty to bank fraud and conspiracy. The restitution order will require them to pay back $214,000 plus interest. Their house will likely be sold. Dad's retirement savings will be liquidated. I take no pleasure in that. None. Bellamy's table closed 4 months ago. Derek is working at a chain restaurant in Concord. He hasn't spoken to me or our parents since the indictment. He's become the ghost of his own ambition. My credit has been restored. It took 11 months of disputes and fraud affidavits, but my score is back to 738. The fraudulent accounts have been removed. I can exist in the financial system without my parents' crimes following me like a shadow. Today, I'm sitting in a 1-bedroom apartment in Noda. The one I was denied 3 years ago. The same leasing office. The same property manager. She remembered me. "Welcome home, Miss Bellamy," she said when she handed me the keys. "I work at Hargrove and Associates as a senior forensic accountant, specializing in fraud detection. My salary is $94,000. I'm very, very good at my job. My parents made sure of that. Mrs. Abernathy came to Charlotte last month. We had lunch near my office. You followed the numbers," she said. I followed the numbers. Was it worth it? I thought about it. Really thought about it. It cost me my family, but it saved my future. They spent my future a long time ago. I just didn't get the invoice until I was 23. Forgiveness is a word I approach carefully, skeptically, with full documentation. I don't hate my parents. I understand the desperation that drove them. But understanding is not absolution. They had a choice. They chose to destroy their daughter's financial life rather than disappoint their son. That choice has consequences. Legal ones, relational ones, permanent ones. If someone in your family has used your trust to fund someone else's dream at your expense, hear this. Your identity is yours. Your credit is yours. Your future is yours. Protecting yourself is not betrayal. The people who tell you to stay quiet for the sake of family are usually the ones who benefited from your silence. Check your credit report. Guard your information. And if the numbers don't add up, follow them. Until next time, remember, trust is not a blank check.